Are you looking for a complete video where you can learn everything about Cursor from start to finish? Then this video is for you. I've spent a lot of time with Cursor, hundreds and even thousands of hours by now, both at my work and my own projects. And it has completely changed the way I write code now. At first, I was very hesitant to use Cursor, but I saw other people using it, so I started picking it up. And then I went to all of the documentation for Cursor and looked at all the other videos on YouTube on Cursor and learned a lot from those lovely creators. So this video is like a compilation of all of that knowledge. In this video, we'll go through almost everything you need to know about Cursor, from basics to some of the advanced stuff too. We'll explore inline code completion, the chat window, which is a super powerful thing. We'll spend most of the time there. We'll even use Cursor to understand and refactor code. Very helpful when you are working with a new programming language. Then we'll look at writing documentation using Cursor, referencing official documentation to write code, using images as context, super powerful, working with terminal and Git. We'll also learn about some of the advanced stuff such as Cursor rules and memories, and a lot more. I've also added some cool tricks and hidden features that I personally use. We'll try all of this on a real project, a simple one, but enough to show how you can actually use Cursor in your day-to-day life. By the end of this video, you'll have a solid understanding of how to make Cursor work for you and how to code faster with AI. So let's get started. In the first part, we'll do a formal introduction to what Cursor AI is. We'll get introduced to why it exists, what problem does it solve, and what exactly it is. So you know that software developers write code, right? But where do they write this code? It's obviously not your notepad, right? They use something called as IDE, which is Integrated Development Environment. Think of IDE like a Swiss Army knife for programmers. It gives you all the features, like the special features, like syntax highlighting, debugging, auto completion. You can simply understand IDE as a very important tool to write code. But these IDEs give us like different capabilities, which is syntax highlighting, debugging, auto completions, and even project management in some of the places. One of the most popular IDEs in the world today is Visual Studio Code, or in short, VS Code. It's lightweight, very customizable, and has become the go-to for every developer nowadays. Now, here's the interesting part. Coding is changing nowadays. And now you see all these AI powered tools inside these IDEs. So these AI powered tools, they actually help us write code and even understand code. It's like auto completions on steroids. You can chat with them, you can ask for their suggestions on your code, and many more capabilities. And this is what Cursor AI does. It's an AI powered IDE. It's built on top of VS Code, but it takes things to another level. We'll take a look at all of these capabilities later on, but think of it like VS Code on steroids. Here are a few capabilities that Cursor provides. It can be used to explain a snippet of code or even the whole file. You can use it to summarize the whole file. You can ask it to fix errors for you. You can refactor a part of code or even like the whole file. Or you can tell them to generate the whole project from scratch, from just an idea. So that is what Cursor AI does. It's a very small introduction, but it should give you a fair bit of idea what Cursor AI does. This is the website that you'll be visiting. It's called cursor.com. Pretty simple, right? You just visit onto their website and click on this download button. Here, I had Mac, so it automatically downloaded it for me. And as you can see the DMG. It has already downloaded. But if you are on a different operating system, you need to click on all downloads right there. And that will take you to this page. Here, as you can see, you have different options for different operating system. You just need to click on these download buttons and the version that you want for the operating system you want gets downloaded. Pretty simple, right? So once it's downloaded, you just follow the installer. It should be pretty simple to use the installer. Once you are done, you can then see the cursor on your laptop. You can open it in your laptop and explore. So this is how a cursor window looks like after the installation. You can see we have options to open a project, clone repository, connect via SSL, multiple different options, and you can see recent projects that we have worked on. We'll dive more deeper into the UI, but we are good to go for the installation. Let's now get to know the basics of Cursor and its UI. So here we start. On the left hand side, we see all of those files and folders in the project that you are working on. Pretty standard. Let's say I double click on this index.html and that file is displayed in this section right here. Standard, right? Next, we move on to the searching. You see that magnifying glass there? Let me click on that. You can search and replace things. So let me search for weather app. So it will give me bunch of different results for that. The third window is for GitHub. Here you can set up the GitHub repository. You can even push your code. You can commit. All of the options are available there. The fourth tab is for extensions. Now, think of extensions like add-ons. You can add more capabilities to this IDE. Let's say you want to add the capability for Python, basic syntax checking, some basic auto completions too. So that can be done via this extension right there. You just click on it and install it. You have many more extensions that you can work with, and that can be found here. Now let's move on to the top. Here you can see file, edit, selection, many different options, and those are pretty standard in terms of IDE. All of these IDs, including VS Code, have these standard ones. You can even open a terminal by clicking on new terminal, and you can even open a new window for a new project, and you can also go to the settings. Now let's move on to the right side, which is the chat window. This is the most interesting part and is different from VS Code. Here, you can open up new chats by clicking on this button right here. You can also look at the chat history by clicking on this button, and you can type in anything. Give me summary for this code file. You can write anything there and just press enter. Now, before going to that, I want to explain you the context. Now, this is how LLMs work. They need some kind of context. So what does context mean? Context means it's like data point for LLMs. They use that data point to answer your question. So let's say, for example, I ask, what is inside this index.html? And I add the context as this particular file and folder. So it will search for index.html inside this weather app and answer according to that. So that is what context means. But we can add more kinds of context. You can add files and folders, code, documentation. We'll see more on that later, but you can use official documentations, up-to-date documentations on these websites for writing the code. Let's say I'm using Flask. I'll copy the documentation link on the website, and then our cursor will use the most recent documentation. Pretty awesome, right? But we can have more context. We can look at previous chats. We can add terminals. Whatever we chat in the terminal, we can use that as a context too. And we have one more, which is images. When you click on this, you can add images. That would include screenshots. You can include wireframe for your app. You can show, okay, I want to create an app that looks something like this and then screenshot it. So all those screenshots can be uploaded here for context. So that is for the context part. Let's move on to the next element. Let me click here. Here we have two options, ask and agent. So ask is just to ask questions. It won't make a change to any of the files or folders. But with agent, you can ask it to make a change. Let's say if I want to make a change in this index.html, maybe add a few more buttons, I can just use this agent and then it will make a change for me. Pretty magical. And we'll see a demo in just a few minutes. Now let's move on to the model. Now, there are multiple models that an LLM uses. Here, the default one is Claude for Sonnet as of now, but it might change in the future. It does have options for GPT-5, GPT-4o, so feel free to select whichever model works perfectly for you. My recommendation would be to go with Claude 4 Sonnet as it's pretty awesome with the code. Okay, before we go, I just want to show you some of the additional settings that Cursor provides us in terms of changing things to chat, context, and other things. So for that, you click on this button right here for settings on the top right, and it will open up a new window for settings called as cursor settings. Here we have general settings, which are pretty standard, pretty similar to what we had in VS Code. But this is where we have the chat one. Here we get some tweaks here and there to make changes to our context. Do we want to do web searching? For that, we'll enable this. For now, I'm just going ahead with the default. But feel free to explore and experiment with these settings. Now we are done with the setup for Cursor. The next step is to experiment a bit with Cursor. But before even going into exploring all of the things inside Cursor, let's just take a small project and then use that project to understand all of the features inside Cursor. So for that small project, we have a GitHub repository where all the code for that small project is written out. Now, what is this GitHub? In simple words, it's a place where you can upload all of the files for your projects and then you can share it with other people. The main purpose of GitHub is version controlling. Now, what is this special word version controlling? Now, let's understand this using an example. Let's say I made change number 1 3 days ago, change number 2 yesterday, and change 3 today. Now, all of a sudden, I realized that some of the files in change number 1 was incorrect and I need to revert that change. We can do so very easily via GitHub and Git. So that's GitHub. Now let's go ahead and do the setup part for our small project. So for that, we'll go on to this link right there, github.com/sweetcody/AI experiments. There you can see a bunch of different things right here. We have this weather app right there. That is the small project we'll be experimenting with. But for now, I want you to download this code. So for that, you need to click on this button right there. Now, there are a bunch of different options in order to have this code on your laptop or work on your own. You can clone this repository, you can open it with GitHub Desktop, or even download zip. For simplicity, let's just click on download zip and downloading will start happening. Okay, we are done with the installation. I would recommend you to unzip the folder and then we can open that folder inside Cursor. Here I am inside Cursor and I'll click on this open project button right there to open our project. Since I have already opened that project multiple times, I can also see that project inside the recent projects. So I'll go ahead and do that. Okay, now we are inside that project. We can see all of our files on the left hand side. Let's take a moment to understand all of the files. I want you to ignore all of the things that you see right now. We'll go deeper into each of these sections for Cursor later on. But for now, let's just focus on those files from this project. So there are 3 main files that I want you to focus on, which is this index.html file. The second one is styles.css. And the third one is app.py. Now, this project is written in such a fashion that the whole structure that you see, the whole skeleton of the weather app is written inside this index.html. Now, what is this skeleton? You see these buttons placed on different places. You see the fonts being placed, the weather app written on top. All of that structuring is being done by this index.html file. Then we have the styles.css file. This is mainly used to do the styling, selecting the font. As you can see, we have selected different fonts. We have different headers. We have different subtitles. So all of that styling is being done inside the styles.css file. The third file I want you to focus on is app.py. This file is the brain. All the logic behind the weather app is written in this file. I won't go very deep into it, but on a high level you can see that it's starting up a Flask app. We'll get to know more about that later on. It has different methods written there, and this index method that you see here, This mainly handles all of the routes, displaying the form and processing weather requests. But mainly, this app.py file includes the logic. What kinds of logic? What happens when you click the button? What happens if you click on a text? All of those logic is written inside this app.py. Okay, we understood the basics of this project. Now let's go ahead and set up our project to see our weather app. So for that, I'll go on to this README file and click on it and say open preview. There we have the whole README section. We'll go on to the quick start. The first step is for us to get our API key. How do we do that? We'll click on this visit open weather map. It will take you to a website, and there you just need to sign up for an account. Here I have already signed up. It's free. I've signed up for it and I have logged in. Once I have logged in, I'll click on this button right here and click on my API keys. And when we do so, this window gets opened up. Here you can see all the API keys that you have created. There is a default one too. Now, what are these API keys? So, as we know, softwares talk to each other. Now, how do they talk to each other? They talk to each other via APIs, and that is what we have here. Now, Open Weather Map is a website which provides access to the current weather conditions on different places. Now, we are writing our software weather app which needs to communicate with this software Open Weather. So, for that, we need an API key with which these two softwares can chat with each other. So, let me go ahead and create a new API key. So, for that, I'll type in weather app and then click on this generate button, and there you go. You see a new key being generated. We'll be needing this key in our further steps. So let me just copy this. Now we are done with our first step. The second step is setting up the project. We need to run these commands. You see the cd weather app, python, vn. We need to run this command in the terminal. How to open terminal in Cursor? So for that, we'll go on top and click on this terminal and new terminal. Okay, we have a new terminal open and now we can run this command. So let me just copy this. Looks like we are already inside this, so we don't need to do anything. Let me just run pwd. Okay, we are inside weather app. Now let's go ahead and run this. So this step will create a virtual environment for Python. Here, if you install any of the things, that should be inside this environment, and it's highly recommended. So just go ahead and do that. Now, once that virtual environment is created, we'll activate that virtual environment. Don't worry if you don't understand these things here. The focus is not on this part here, but to understand Cursor, which we'll be doing later on. Now, if you're using Windows, you can just use this command that is written here. I'm on Mac, so I just use source. The next step is to install the dependencies, and that you can do using pip. So I'm just running this command and it will download all the dependencies that are required for this project. Okay, it took a while and now it's installed. Now let's move on to the third step, which is configuring environment. I'll just run this command cp.env.example.env. This will copy the .env.example file onto a new file called as .env. So let me just run that. Okay, now we see another new file being created called as .env. Now we need to update our Open Weather API key in this .env file with the key that we generated. So let me just copy that here and save it. For saving, you just need to use Command S or Control S on Windows. Okay, we are done with the third step. Let's now move on to the fourth one, which is running the application. This is pretty crowded, so I'll just clear things out. Okay, let's just copy this and then run. Looks like our application is up and running. We can look at our newly created weather app by clicking on this. This will open it in our web browser. Here we have our weather app, and let's see if it works or not. Let's say if I type in Boston and get weather. Voila, it's working perfectly. We can see the fields like, we can see the temperature, humidity, wind and pressure. So our application is up and running. Just a small reminder before you go. If you see some kind of error, with your weather app, it might be that your API key hasn't been activated. It may take a couple of hours to get activated, but once it's activated, you're good to go. And that's it for the whole project setup. Now we are done with the cursor setup, cursor overview, the project setup. Let's now move on to more interesting stuff, which is exploring the cursor features. And the first one is inline code completion. It's a very simple feature. You will start writing out code and it will recommend you the whole section or the whole method. So let me just summarize the background until now and then we can see this in action. So this is our weather app. It shows us fields like humidity, pressure, wind. Now I want some more features to be displayed here. Let's say I want to show you the temperature max and temperature min along with it. So for that, let's go back to our code. As you know, the brain or the logic is inside the app.py and the styling is inside styles.css and the structuring, the skeleton is inside index.html. Now I'll look into this index.html. Looking at it, it feels like this is the main header in here. Then we have weather search form, but we are interested inside the weather results section. So that's what we have here, weather results section. And inside that we see these four things, feels like humidity, pressure and wind. After this, I just will say that, okay, I'll just comment it out. And for that, I'll just use comments. Let's say I just do a comment, add temp, min and max. And I'll press enter. Okay, when I press enter, adding a comment, it recommended me some code. So this is how I usually do things. When I want inline code completions, I write a very descriptive comment there. It's not like this one. It's not that descriptive, but on a usual basis, I try to write comments very descriptive manner. That way our AI knows what to and how to implement things. So in this case, I added a comment, add temperature min and max, and it recommended me some code. According to me, it looks good. So I'll hit tab and the code completion just happens magically. Okay, so now it looks good. Let me just check if it works or not. So I'll go back to the weather app and refresh. Voila, it works perfectly. But here's the catch. I knew the project in and out, and that is why I was able to make the change in a specific position. And so with inline code completions, you need to know where a certain part of code is written. Okay, before you go, I want to show you one more capability with the inline code completion. Let me just first get rid of this part and I'll select a part that I'm interested in, and you see this option right here, quick edit. So I'll click on that and a small window pops up there. I can add suggestions or maybe recommend some changes in that part of code. So let's say I want to add the wind speed. So I'll just add wind speed here and just hit enter. It will go through your code one by one and make some changes there. Looks like we already had wind speed. So it detected that, okay, wind speed was already there and we just needed a name change. So I'll say that if I like this code, I'll just click on this keep. But if I don't like it, I'll just click on this undo. You can even make changes with this. Okay, wind speed in meter per second, or this is also fine. So you can make changes to that. I'll do a keep and let me just go back to this and refresh it. Okay, now we see the wind has been changed to wind speed. You can do more elaborate things here by selecting a snippet of code and then asking it to make the change for you. Very useful. And that's all for the inline code completions. Let's learn about the chat window in Cursor AI. This is the most interesting and important feature in Cursor, and you can use it to create all sorts of things, make all sorts of changes, learn new things. When I learned about this feature from Cursor, I was very excited to experiment, and I want you guys to open up your Cursor and experiment along with me. So let's just go ahead and learn about this chat window. This is our application. A quick reminder, this is how our weather app looks like. You add the name of the place and click on get weather and you see the weather. Now I want to make a small change to it. I want to change the background color. Now, previously we saw we could make those changes inline by finding the snippet of code where we want to make the change and then highlighting it and then asking cursor to make the change. But with this chat feature, we don't even need to find out where that code snippet is written. And that's what makes it super powerful. So let me just go ahead and type in change the background color to, let's say, ruby. Okay, let's just do that. Okay, it's trying to understand the thing. So it made some changes in styles.css, which I feel that should be the case. So in order to review the changes that it did, you see this review next file button. I'll click onto that and it opens up the styles.css and the section where it made the change. So let me look. The background has been changed to orange. This change looks good to me. So I'll click on keep to keep the changes. I'll save it and then I'll go back to the app. I'll hit refresh and there you go. It made a change for you. And this is just the beginning. Let's explore more on what cursor can do. Now let's say I have a small change to make. I see these things feels like humidity, pressure, wind speed, max and min temperature. Let me just get rid of these max and min temperatures. So I'll ask this in the chat. Let's see what happens. I'll say remove min and max temperature from my app. I'll wait for a bit and see what it does. If you want to dive deeper into what it's doing, just read through that. For now, I'll be skipping that part and just clicking on review next file. Okay, it looks to me that it got rid of this section where we are having the min and max temperature, and according to me, this looks correct. So I'll just click on this keep and it added one space there. Let me get rid of that. Okay, now let's refresh our app. And there you go, it got rid of min and max temperature. So these are very small changes I asked in the chat, but you can ask for a more elaborate or more complex change. But there is one recommendation, a strong recommendation from my side. After experimenting a lot with cursor, I would recommend a medium to small change. And even if you are giving a medium to small change, give as much information as you can give. Let's say in this page, I want to change the font. I want to change the font for the heading and the name of the place, change the background color. I want to show weather for two different places. For that, I would recommend writing all of those changes very specifically and making changes one by one. Okay, let me do some more experimentation with this chat window. Let me just go ahead inside app.py and I want to check what is the JSON data that we get from OpenWeather. And I know that it's inside index and I want to print it out, what JSON we are getting. But that is what I know about this project. Let's see if cursor can find it out and add a print statement for that JSON. So let me ask it, can you print out the JSON we get from open whether I want to take a look at it? It's a very simple and straightforward prompt. Let's see what it does. Okay, it did some changes there. What it's trying to do is whenever we get a successful response that is status code 200, it's trying to print out the OpenWeather API response. And for that, it's using json.dumps that you see right here in the print statement. I think in this case, it should work. So I'll click on keep. Now let's just test our changes. Let's change our place to lentil and then click on get weather. Okay, it worked perfectly. Now let's look at our JSON. As you can see, the OpenWeather API response is there and we see a bunch of stuff being printed out. The whole JSON is being printed out. So that worked perfectly. Again, an emphasis on the amount of change that you want from this window. I can just go into this chat and ask it to create a new page with showing the prediction or the forecast for next 10 days. I can ask it to make that big change, but I wouldn't do so. I would basically break down the whole change, the large change, into smaller to medium changes and then ask the chat to make those small to medium changes. The reason why I say so is because either you can give AI to make the larger changes, and then afterwards you can spend a lot of time debugging, or you can spend your time right now to break down that change so that you don't spend more time in debugging. We'll demonstrate some of that long debugging sessions later on, but remember to always ask for a small to medium change. Okay, let's move forward. One more thing I want to emphasize on is the token. Now, what is this token? You see, just like humans have some memory, these LLMs or AI also have memory. The longer you chat in this window, the memory is being used to store this information, the things that you chatted about. You see this bar right here? It says 13%. So we have already utilized 13% of the memory. So whenever you chat, you see these words, can you print out the JSON? Those are tokens. So those gets used up, and you see this bar going from 5% to 13% to 20% to 100%. So basically the whole memory is being used up by the AI. And if in case that happens, let's say it goes to 80%, 90% or even 100%, I would recommend you to open a new chat window and then chat there. Now you might be wondering, I have spent an hour chatting in this tab or window. I have lost all of the context. Now I can't chat further in this window. Well, there is a neat trick to that too. If you open a new chat window, you can add context to the previous tabs. So you can click on this and then go to past chats. And then you can click on this to add the context there. Pretty neat, right? So let me get rid of this and come back. Also, one very interesting detail that I have learned by working on Cursor for a long time now, if you're stuck with some kind of debugging, let's say you ask it to make a small change, and for some reason it's stuck and it's unable to make the favorable changes. In that case, I would recommend you to change the model. So in this case, you see Claude for Sonnet. I'll recommend you create a new chat in there, select a different model, and give the needed context even from the previous chat. That sometimes really helps me in debugging. It's like asking for a third opinion. Okay, one very important detail I want you to know. Let's say I made a small change. In this case, I am printing out the Open Weather API response. Let's say I don't want to have that, and that was my previous chat. Now I want to revert back. I don't want that change anymore. So you can do that in just one click. You just click on this button right here and it says restore checkpoint. I'll just click on that and it will ask me for a confirmation. I'll just continue and there you go. We are back at that spot. So let me just reload this and let's say I click on get weather. It isn't printing anything now. Let's say you have done a lot of changes. Let's say you chatted with this window again and again and made 2 to 3 different changes or even 4 to 5, more than that. You can go in the chat history and then revert to that change, and all of the changes are reverted. This is a feature that I have used a lot because there are hallucinations with AI and many times it doesn't get what I'm trying to say. I'll let you go, but before that, let me try to attempt a very big change. I want our application to show weather for 2 different places, and I want to have 2 different text inputs for those 2 different places. And when I click on get weather, it should show both of those weathers side by side. So for that, let me write down a quick prompt. Can you show me weather for 2 different places? I want to have 2 different text inputs for 2 places, and when I click on get weather, it should show 2 weather side by side. Let's hit enter. Let's see what it does. Okay, so it does some kind of to-do listing before it does the change. So you can follow that along. It's first updating the HTML template to have 2 city inputs. That's reasonable. You want to have that. So let's just follow it. So it is adding 2 different ones, city 1 and city 2. That looks right to me. What are the other changes it's doing? It's changing the Flask route to handle two cities in the post request. So let's just look at that. Okay, weather data 1, weather data 2, city 1, city 2, pretty standard. So another recommendation, whenever it does a lot of those changes, many times we are pretty lazy to just accept those changes. Here you have to take the role of a very strong reviewer and assume that it's a junior developer making the changes. So be aware that it can make a lot of changes. So better to be a good reviewer right now rather than debugging for a number of hours. So after the HTML changes, it did some changes to the Flask route and then update the weather display to show two weather. Okay, that looks correct to me. And then it updated the CSS to show the dual weather. Okay, kind of the layout thing. Okay, you can see the changes that it made. It had 4 steps. You can follow along. And I won't spend a lot of time right now in this video just reviewing it. I'll just say keep all and just move on. I'll review the next file. This looks good to me. I'll go for the next file and it's adjusting a lot of things here. So I'll save all of those changes and fingers crossed it should work. And if it doesn't, we'll do the debugging together. Okay, I'm refreshing this and it looks awesome to me. It worked on the first go, which is amazing. Let me just try. I'll add Boston here and then click on get weather. Okay, it looks good to me. We are able to see London and Boston together, but I wanted it to be side by side. So let me just ask the chat that it's showing me one after the other. I want it side by side. I see it works perfectly, but I wanted the weather to be side by side. Let's see. According to me, I think it should make changes to the layout part. Everything else looks good to me. So it did some changes in the styles.css, which is expected. So let's just review those changes. Okay, it has done its job and I'll just say keep all for now and just I'll go back to the screen and then reload. Voila, it works perfectly. I was thinking maybe we can do some debugging here, but I think we have done a great job in instructing it very well. Let's explore one more feature from Cursor, which is explaining the code. I use it almost every single day. I use it to understand a snippet of code, or if I don't understand a programming language, I spend a lot of time just chatting with Cursor, understanding what is written there and understanding the programming language nuances. Sometimes when I'm starting out, I use it for understanding the whole project. It gives me a summary. We'll be exploring all of that in this video. So let's just start small. Let me open a new tab here. Okay, the first thing I want to show you is understanding a snippet of code. So let's say I am in this file called app.py and I see this code right here. The try, catch, and then accept, request.exceptions, timeout. There's a bunch of stuff written here. So I'll just select that section here and then I'll click on add to chat. Now this adds a context for this particular section of the code in the chat. Now I can ask the question, explain me this code in simple language. Okay, so it did give us some results. Let's look at them now. So this is what it says. Here's what each part does. So making the request, line 63 to 67. So this is the part which is making the API request. Then it says it waits up to 10 seconds for response, which is picking up from here. And then handling different problems. So there could be a case when city is not found. In 68 to 70, city not found. Please check the spelling and try again. Okay, that is understandable. The second one is other service errors from line number 71 to 73. And this includes all sorts of errors. If the weather service has other kinds of problems, it shows this. For example, code 500. There is something wrong with the server. So it goes into this else statement. So it explained perfectly. And then it talks about some of the timeouts from 75 to 76. If the weather service takes too long to respond, more than 10 seconds, it gives up and it throws this exception. So as you can see, it explained me each of these lines and what it does. Since Python is a very easy language to pick up, it wasn't that complicated. But if you're working on a more complicated language or more complex things, especially in languages like C++, you can take use of this and it will explain you that part of the code. Now it explained me a part of code. Let's say I want to summarize what is happening inside this whole file. Let's just ask it. So for that, I'll add the context to this file, which is app.py, and then ask it, okay, tell me the summary of app.py. What is happening inside it on a high level? Okay. So it started explaining what this app does. This is a Flask web application that lets user compare weathers between two cities. The main components is from line 1 to 25. Okay. It does imports, load settings from .env files. It's a Flask web application. Then we have some helper functions from 27 to line 81, and that looks good. And the main web route is in line number 83 to 131. That also looks good. And it handles get and post requests in this index and some error handling from 133 onwards and app startup from 145. And it gave us a high level overview on how it works. User visits the website, sees a form asking for the two city names, enters cities and submits. So it gave us a high level on how the application works. So we understood this particular file. Let's take this to another level. Let's ask it to explain all of the open files or even the whole project inside the weather app. So for that, we need to change the context. So I'll get rid of this and add basically all of the files and folders. Now for that, you can click on files and folders and then click on this weather app. That should add the context for the whole project. But I'll give you a neat trick that I use pretty often. So if you press slash, there you can see the option to add open files to context. So I'll add that and ask explain me this whole project and its different files. Let's see what it gives us. Okay, so it gave the project overview. This is a Flask web application that lets user compare. That looks good. File structure. This is the brain as we defined. The front end is in index.html. There are some key features. The visual design is in styles.css. It also gave us an overview of requirements.txt where details of all of the dependencies live. And it also described the .env file where we have defined the Open Weather API key. And it also told us about how everything works together. This is a very important detail. If you don't see this user journey, you can ask for it. You can ask for, okay, when the user clicks on a particular thing, how does that ignite? Where does that data go? And how are all of these files linked to each other? So if you don't get this user journey, I would say you to add a prompt for that, asking for the user journey and asking for how our data comes into this application, weather app, and how it goes to different files. So in this case, this is the most important detail here. You can even ask it to expand more on the user journey, and that's it. It also discusses the visual design highlights, the color scheme that we have used, technical stack, and many other things. So you see the power of this prompt. It's a simple prompt, but you can learn a lot about languages. You can even ask, let's say you're new to Python, you can learn more about Python too. Let's learn about one more capability that Cursor provides, which is adding documentation. Many a times when we are working on these projects, we are very excited to work on the exciting stuff and we don't get time to add documentation on what is inside this application, how it runs, and all the other details. And this is where Cursor shines. You just ask Cursor to write documentation for a particular file or the folder, how to set up common debugging issues, and it will just get you started. Then you can add more things inside it. So in this project, we do have a README file there. But let's say we get rid of that and ask it to generate us a new README. Can it do it? Let's see. So let me just close this and let me just get rid of this. I'll say delete. Yes, move to trash. Now let me open a new tab, and based on the Python application that we have here for weather app, can you write me read me including now what do we want to include in this? An overview, then going over some of the important files and what it does. Then we want to have a section how to set up instructions and also common debugging. I think that should be it. For this, I'll give the context for the whole project. So for that, I'll go to files and folders and then select the weather app. And let's get started. So while this is running, I'll give you a small disclaimer. It won't dive deeper into all of the aspects of the documentation. You definitely have to add a lot of things, but it will get you started. In this case, we have a Python Flask application, so it knows how to run that. So it will get started with that in the README section. But if there's a specific thing that you want in the documentation, you'll need to do that. Okay, it has created a new README file. It has a bunch of different stuff. I'll just go ahead and review the file. Now I want to view this markdown file. So I'll just preview it so that it's more visually pleasing. Weather app, a clean, intuitive Flask-based application. That looks good using the Open Weather API. And its the overview is there, 3-day forecast, error handling is there, and the project structure is there. I didn't ask for it, but it still gave me the project structure. This says the main Flask application is in there. The styling is here, and we have the main HTML template here. Okay. And it also described us the important files and some of the important key functions there. And it does have index.html, styles.css, requirements.txt. That's great. Let's look at the setup instructions if it's right or not. So we need Python 3.8 Open Weather API key. It is asking us to git clone. You can even go to the repository and then download the zip file. We can make changes to this documentation to mention that. We have the virtual environment, installing dependencies, getting the API key, configuring the API key. I think it also added some secret key. I think we don't need it in our project, so we'll get rid of that. As I said, it adds some generic stuff too according to the Flask application, so that's what it did with the secret key. But other than that, mostly it looks right to me. And usage part, common debugging, I think it has written a bunch of stuff. It has added much more than I expected. So I'll mostly get rid of some of these debugging parts and some other things. But other than that, it has done a great job in documentations. So here's my recommendation. Use this feature in Cursor to break the inertia to document. At least it can get you started from somewhere, and then you can make changes to the README file. It's a common practice to document things when you're working on it, and this feature from Cursor will help you do that. Both of these are a very powerful concept inside Cursor. If I have to explain it in one line, I would say rules provide system level instructions to our agent or inline edit, whatever we do inside Cursor. You can think of them as persistent context, the context that stays with your Cursor chat for a long time. You can add some preferences according to your project or code writing style. There are a bunch of different stuff. I'm pretty excited. Let's just dive in. We are inside Cursor. This is a weather app that we have built. Pretty simple one. Now let's say I have standard practice of using camel cases inside of my files. You might have seen this. If you ask this in the chat, many a times it starts writing code which isn't according to our convention, especially in newer projects. Let's say you open a new project and you start writing code. And again, you have to suggest the chat that this is my style. Can you write in it? That is where cursor rules and memories come in. It's like persistence of your preferences inside cursor. You don't have to always go inside and tell these are my preferences in, let's say, Flask, in, let's say, React. This is how I write code in React. This is how I write code in Java. You just save those preferences in something called as cursor rules, and then cursor remembers all of those preferences when writing code. And this was much needed. You see, this was much needed. Now, everybody knows that there are particular nuances for different teams. Some team might prefer camel cases, some team might prefer snake case. So that is why cursor rules are very important. So let me just go ahead and do the setup first. So this is how you set it up. If you are inside cursor, just go to this settings, and in general, you might see this privacy section there. Inside this, just click on this, and then you might need to change to privacy mode or share data rather than privacy mode legacy. So I'll switch to privacy mode. Feel free to do it for share data too, that works too. I'll go for privacy mode. And once I am done, I'll go to rules and memories. Now, when you come inside rules and memories, you can enable memories. We'll understand memories in a bit. You can add user rules right here. You can also add project rules inside this. So there's a bunch of different stuff, and we'll get into all of them right now. Let's just understand project rules now first. So project rules are such kind of rules which are used for the whole project. These files are also version controlled inside a project, and they can be used for specific path patterns, maybe invoked manually when you add them into the context here. Here you see the section for adding rules. You can use that, or it could be included based on relevance. So let's understand all of this using an example. So let's say I go ahead and add a rule. It will ask me for the rule name. I'll just say Flask rules and enter. Now you see a new Flask rules.mdc file right here, and you can see it is inside .cursor/rules. Here inside this file, you have this option right here. If you click on it, you can see it has 4 options right there, and the first one is always apply, which basically says if you want to apply this rule always, all the time, then select this option. If not, apply intelligently. Now this is where cursor will decide whether to use this rule or not. If you select that, it will also ask that describe the task this rule is helpful for. So let's say you have a specific convention for particular kinds of files. You can add this here, or any other kind of rules that is specific to a particular task, then just describe it right there. The next option is apply to specific files. Now, if you select this option, as it says, when file matches a specified pattern. So when you select this, then you'll see that here we get options to add the file extensions or even regex patterns that you want, and only on those files this rule will be applied. This is especially useful when your project has different kinds of files, different file extensions. Let's say some parts is written in TypeScript, some part is in Python, some in Java. So in that case, you can add specific rules for those files. Moving on to next one, which is quite straightforward, apply manually. In this case, as the name suggests, you need to apply this rule manually. It won't be added into the context right away. So you'll have to go inside this and then go for rules and then select Flask rules. And that's how these rules get added. Now let's head back to our cursor settings again. Now one more interesting fact about project rules. You can have these rules inside subdirectories too. You see this .cursor/rules. You can have it inside different directories for different conventions that you want to follow. Let's say our whole application had backend written in Python and frontend was done by React. So in that case, each of those subfolders can have these .cursor/rules directory, and that gives us immense power, immense capability to change things according to ourselves. Some of the common use cases that I use project rules for is encoding domain specific knowledge about the code base that I'm working on. Let's say I'm working on a project and it has some domain specific knowledge that I or the team knows about. So I'll add that information there. Or a very common use case is standardizing style or architecture decisions. So let's say in the past we took some architecture decisions or some standard styling that we want to have. I would just go ahead and add that to the cursor project files. And in most cases, I'll apply those rules always. And that's it. It works wonders in many of the cases. And I highly encourage you to use that. Now let's move on to the user rules. User rules in simple language are basically rules that user uses. Pretty confusing, right? So for example, if you open up new projects, these user rules would still be there, but project rules would be gone because those were specific to that particular project. Now, if you add a particular rule inside this, so let's say I add a particular rule for user rules. It's for commit message format, and I want to use present tense, limit subject to 50 characters, add body with what y, wrapped at 72 characters. Now, this is a standard convention that I follow throughout my projects, and that is why I'm writing this inside user rules. And once I'm done, I'll just click on done. And there you go, you have a user rule there. Let me add something inside our Flask rules MDC file too. Here I have added a bunch of Flask project rules that I want to use. And it's pretty straightforward. The writing is very similar to the MD file, the markdown file that we use. And one more thing that we discussed. So in there we see that inside the weather app, we have this dot cursor slash rules, flask rules.mdc. If I want, I can add another dot cursor rules file inside this static. So I'll create one dot cursor slash rules. And inside of that, similar to what we have here, I'll just create a new file and just call it static rules.mdc. And as you can see, when I create that, it automatically opens that up in the window, and there you can select all of these options that you like. You can add a bunch of different stuff here which should be used inside this static folder. This is the interesting part. We have created nested cursor rules right now. Now if you see this flask rules.mdc, these rules will be followed by the whole project inside weather app. Whereas this specific rules inside static rules.mdc will be only followed by the files inside this static directory. And that gives you a lot of space to customize rules according to your directories. Now you might be wondering, we are always talking about these rules, but how do we write these rules? You can obviously think about your rules. You can talk to the team that you're working in and ask about what rules do you want, or you can pick something solid from the internet. So let me give you one resource that I have been using a lot for my projects. So this is cursor.directory. And here you can find all of the rules that you want for your project. So let's say I want to search for Flask. I'll just search for Flask. And you can see that there are specific rules for Flask that other people have already used and is trustworthy. Here you can see the rules starts like this. You are an expert in Python, Flask and scalable API development. There are some key principles that you need to follow. Python, Flask, error handling and validation, dependencies, and this is pretty elaborate. So what you need to do is basically go in here and copy this, go back to your project, and then I'll open Flask rules. I'll just delete this stuff and then copy paste this part right there. And then you come back to your project and then paste the stuff that you copied from cursor.directory. And there you have it. Now you can use all of these rules, which are kind of standard for Flask in your project. Apart from going to cursor.directory, there is one more interesting way you can generate your rules, and that is inside cursor. And that is something that I have used a lot. I'll find a project on GitHub which has a lot of stars and I see some positive reviews for that repository and is well maintained. I'll clone that repository in my laptop. I'll open that project inside cursor. And then once I am inside the project, I'll just use slash, and then you see this option right there, generate cursor rules. Just click on it and then you can generate the cursor rules for that particular project. Cursor will go inside all of your files inside that project and generate rules according to that. Then once those rules have been generated, I just copy all of those rules and use it inside my project, the one that I was working on. Pretty cool, right? This is, I think, one of the newest feature that Cursor have as of 2025, but it makes the life of developers so easy. Now, I don't need to go on the internet to find which is the most relevant one according to my tech stack. There is one more way for you to add your rules, and that is using the agents.md file. Agents.md is a simple markdown file which we can use for our cursor rules. We just need to place it inside the root directory. So let me just create a new file, not inside this, but inside this, and let's do agents.md. And then inside this, you can add all of the rules. Let's say I add this instruction right there for the code style and architecture. So unlike project rules, agents.md, as it says, it's a markdown file. It doesn't need to store complex information. It's perfect for projects that are very simple and you need to add some readable instructions. And this is an example that I took from the Cursor website. It just says use snake case for database columns, prefer functional components in React. Now, again, a reminder, this agents.md is used for the whole project rather than a particular subdirectory. Now, before you run away working on a project with custom rules, I would highly suggest reading this from the Cursor documentation. They have some 4 to 5 best practices, and I would suggest you must read it. It basically says 5 different things. It says keep rules under 500 lines. You don't want to be too elaborate, otherwise, our agent will be totally confused. The next one is split large rules into multiple composable rules. That's what we saw, right? If we want to have some specific rules for a particular folder, you just add cursor rules inside that folder. The third one is providing concrete example or referenced files. So we haven't seen that yet, but you can add examples of code snippets or even reference files by using @ inside the cursor rules. You can say that this is how I want my files to be and then reference that file inside the rules. The fourth one is avoid vague guidance. I would say avoid broader guidance. Your rule should be very clear. It should avoid any kind of ambiguities. You shouldn't leave space for agent to think on its own. Rather, you want these guardrails placed inside cursor rules. And the last one is reuse rules when repeating prompts in chat. And that's pretty straightforward. So basically, all of these practices make sure that all of our rules are focused, actionable, and scoped. And these rules will serve as the guardrails when we are writing our code. We are back inside Cursor. Let's now understand memories. Now, memories feature that we see here inside Cursor settings right there is very similar to rules, but here we don't need to explicitly write down our preferences. The agent works on our task, and based on that, it forms its memories, and that's what is saved right there. So I'll enable memories. And let's say I'm working on app.py. I'll select this and just say, can you add imports in alphabetical order? Remember the future. Let's see what it does. Okay, it started reading and updating memory created. It made some changes. I'll just accept those changes and keep it. And then when I go back to cursor, I can view my saved memories by clicking in here, by clicking on show. User prefers imports to be organized in alphabetical order. This should be applied to all Python files going forward. If you want, you can edit it here saying that I want it for all of my Java or Kotlin files too. Pretty awesome, right? But this memory updation can happen in two ways. The one that we saw is we explicitly mentioned that we want to create a memory. Basically, remember this for the future. But there could be other cases where cursor uses something called a sidecar approach, and this happens when you chat with it, and this happens passively in the background. You repeatedly ask for something again and again, and it forms memories. And those memories, as we saw, can be seen here inside the cursor settings. You can go and edit them too. Whenever it's forming a memory, you can see this memory created, and that's how you know that memory for that particular thing has been created. We learned a lot in this, and I want you guys to experiment with the rules and memories. There are multiple other resources for you to get your rules. I highly encourage experimenting a lot with your project and finding out specific rules you want in your project. Let's learn about a very powerful feature that Cursor provides, which is referring to official documentations. So, this is a very common problem we saw while working with AI. The information there wasn't up to date. So, let's say a new version came for Flask, but for some reason, the AI is trained on a previous data. It doesn't have the new information that was released recently. So, in order to counter that problem, what we need to do is give the official documentation link to Cursor, and it will make sure to use that data while writing code for you. Let's say you want to use the up to date Flask, you want to use other modules and use their official documentation. You just need to add the documentation in here. And when you're asking it questions or asking the agent to do things for you, you can just add the documentation as a context. So let's just explore that. Let's demo it. So here I am on Google. I just searched for Flask documentation, and let's say this is the official documentation. I'll just copy this link. You can also copy the link for specific section in this documentation. Let's say I am interested in handling application errors. So I'll just click on this and then copy this. Now, when you come inside, you can click on this add and then add docs. And then here you can add the link for the documentation. In order to add the documentation, you need to click on this add, and then you have the option as docs. Just click on that. Here it gives you some of the suggestions for the documentation. I see a bunch of them, but scroll down and you'll see an option for add new doc. So I'll just select that. And here you can paste the link that we had and then click on enter. And you can give it a name. Let's say I say class documentation. And then once done, I'll click on confirm. So here we have it. But there is one strong recommendation. When you're adding big documentations, here we had a small one for Flask. You can add bunch of more documentations here. Just wait for the code base indexing to complete. Once that is complete, then your cursor is able to comprehend the information inside all of that documentation and is able to use it. So once the indexing is 100%, I'll just close this cursor settings. And then now let's say let me open a new tab here and I'll refer the documentation. So I'll go to the docs and use the Flask documentation here. I'll click on it and the context has been selected. Now let me go inside this code here and I see a bunch of error handling. So I'll just add a new context as app.py and say, can you look at the official Flask documentation and then correct the error handling, although it's correct, but let's see what it does according to it in this file. So it's looking at the Flask documentation and trying to follow the best practices, but I deliberately had it ambiguous, but it's doing a great job here. So it's reading through different files, index.html, and it created a to-do list, is fixing some error handlers. I'll give it some time to work on it and see what it does. So it started creating bunch of these 404 HTML, 500 HTML. Okay, it's done doing its job. It has made changes to 5 of the files. The one that I see inside app.py, it did a bunch of different stuff. It added some logging and it also added some warnings. That looks good to me. Some warnings here too, some errors, some logging of errors too. Overall, this looks okay to me, but it did make changes to the README file and some more creation of 404.html. Basically, what it will display in the case of 404 and 500. And it did some changes in styling. And that's pretty much it. I think it did a great job. If you don't want to have a separate page for 400 or 500, you can do so. It looks like it's following the documentation to make changes to the code according to the norms written in the documentation. So that's the power of cursor. You can add a bunch of different documentation, wait for it to index, and then use that as a reference in your code. This is some super powerful stuff because most of the times we often complain that the information there isn't up to date in the AI. So you can manually add the things that are missing. Let's say there's a migration from version V1 to V2. You can add the official documentation for the migration and you can add the context for the whole project and it can do the migration for you. So now we can get rid of not doing the boring task ourselves, but giving it to AI and then we'll review that. Let's learn about adding more context in the form of images in Cursor. Using images to explain a thing is pretty common to humans, so let's use it on machines now. Let's use Cursor AI to use that as context and make changes to our application. So in order to add the image as context, you need to go into this and click on it and add the relevant image. So for our weather app, I want to add forecast. So let's say for next 4 to 5 days, I want to show the weather forecast for the cities. So this is the image I will give as a reference and I will say, you see these 10-day forecasts? I want to show that for our cities and I don't want to show for the next 4 to 5 days. I just want to show it for the next 3 days. So let's see if it can understand the context and make the relevant changes. So once you add the image can be seen here as a context. So I'll ask, as per the image, I want to add a section for 3 days forecast for the cities. Can you do it for me? I just want to know the temperature for the next 3 days. Okay, let's see how it performs. So while it's doing its task, I'll give you some more insights. So there could be some cases where you are stuck with some problems in the terminal, or maybe you have a framework, wireframe for, let's say, adding a new page to this weather app. You can add all of those images to this chat and then ask it to make those pages for you. This is a very common use case. You can even add screenshots from different PDFs, or you can even upload images from the weather app and say that make changes to this particular place in the weather app. So it did its job. It created a to-do list for it, add forecast API endpoint, and add forecast section to HTML, and then it's adding the style CSS. Let's review these files. So it created a new method called get forecast data for a city name, checking if the API is configured or not. If it's trying to send a request on this forecast URL. I think we are setting the forecast URL somewhere here. That looks good. And then we are using that and we are checking if it's successful. Then we are looking at the forecast for the first 24 forecast, that is 3 days. And I think overall it looks good to me. We'll get to know a lot. If we get into some issues, we'll do the debugging together. Let's review the next one. This section basically adds the 3-day forecast. So it's kind of a loop for 3 days. This looks good to me. And this is the forecast section. Okay, let's just go ahead and click on keep all for all of these files. And let's see what happens. So once it did its job, it will explain you what changes it did and make sure to read those to understand what changes it made. So in case if you are stuck with some kind of issues, you can read through that and understand where to debug. So let's just test things out. We have this website. Let me just reload it. And fingers crossed, let's see. Okay. Oh, that looks awesome. There are some issues with the layout. We might want to adjust that, but it is able to show the 3-day forecast very well. This is where I'll use the images for debugging purpose. I'll just screenshot this and just give this context to our cursor and then say, You see the issue in the bottom. There is no gap between them and it's overflowing. Can you fix it for me? Okay, it's trying to fix the problem. It's looking at the styles.css, which is understandable because it's a layout issue and some spacing issue and overflowing issue. So it's adding some padding, making some changes to the minimum width that will prevent it from overflow. And I think it's done with the changes. Yes, I think it's done with the changes. And I'll just click on keep all. And now I'll review. Okay, let's reload. And now it looks perfect. You saw how we did the debugging part with just images? That's how you'll usually do with your applications. You see something is off, just screenshot it, upload it to Cursor, and then ask it to make the relevant changes. In most of the cases, it will be able to do it. Adding images is a very powerful thing, and I highly encourage you to use that. We'll learn about terminals inside Cursor. We'll use Cursor to debug things inside terminal. If you find some issues, we'll go back and forth with the terminal and see how Cursor fixes it. Now let me just close this application and clear stuff here. Let's say I clear this up, and now I just want to make a small change. Let's say I'm inside app.py and by mistake I deleted this and I saved it. Now, if I try to run my application, it's working fine, it says. Let me now open the weather app now. Oops, there is some issue. I can see the issue here. It doesn't show up, or does it show up inside our console? Oops, there is some issue with our file. That request is not defined. Remember, we removed the import line there. Let's come back here. Let's look at our logs in the terminal. I see a bunch of stuff here, and that's the usual case. It logs a lot. We can see a lot of logs inside this terminal. This is where it says name request is not defined. Did you mean request? And I think it's an import issue. So what I'll do is I'll just basically select all of it. And then as you can see, there's an option add to chat. So I'll add to chat. And let me get rid of this whole context. It took the whole thing as context. And now let me ask it question. Can you fix this issue for me? Okay, it can see the issue. It's a name error because request module isn't being imported. So it fixed the problem correctly. So whenever you see these long logs inside the terminal and you don't know the issue, just copy paste it and add to chat. And then you can ask it to fix the problem. But remember again, whenever it's fixing, try to read what's happening there and how it's fixing so that if it gets stuck or it isn't able to solve the problem, you can try understand it here and then try to fix the problem. Okay, in this case, this looks good and hopefully now our application should work. So let me just come here and reload it and it's back again. Okay, let's take another example. Let me just clear things out here. Let me stop the application by Control C in your Mac. Let me clear this out. Let's say for some reason I got rid of this environment and let's try to run this application now. And it's running. Let's go to our weather app and reload this. Okay, it says unable to get weather data. Please check the city names and try again. Okay, there's something wrong and it says weather service not configured. Please add your API key.env file. So we do have a hint that we need some changes to that .env file. Let's screenshot this and then add it to the chat. Can you fix this for me? It identified the problem correctly. Please add your API key.env. It looks like the env file is not there. So what it's trying to do is create a new .env file. And it's asking us, do you want to run this command or skip, or you want to add things differently? In this case, I'll just go ahead and hit run. and it will run the command inside the terminal. Sometimes what happens is that we don't remember the terminal commands and we are just Googling things around. Now we don't even need to remember those commands. Okay, I'll go ahead, and this particular thing basically adds the API configuration. I definitely want to add it for the OpenWeather API key, but I don't want it for the Flask secret key. So what I'll do is I'll say reject and tell things differently. And I'll say do not add the Flask secret and hit enter. I think I misspelled the Flask, but I think it got it correctly. And now it's only adding the OpenWeather map API key. Okay. It has created a new env file, but we do not have the API key here. So it should probably fail. So let's just go back to our application. Let me reload this. Okay, we see the problem still. I'll just say, I see the problem. I still see the problem. Can you fix it? It's trying to see what's inside the env file. So it has identified the issue correctly. We are using a placeholder API key, your API key here, and it's giving me steps on how to do it. It is suggesting me to go to the OpenWeather Map API and then sign up for a free account and then get my API key and paste it here. In this case, it's also giving me an option to test with a dummy API key. In this case, we do not want to do that. So I'll just simply skip it. And it gave me a fix on signing up on OpenWeather Map and then using that API key. Now I have made changes to the .env file and it should work now. And here we have it. It's working as expected. Let me show you an example. Let's say I change it to Mumbai and get weather, and it's working perfectly. So what we learned in this video was Cursor has the capability to debug issues inside your terminal too. It can run commands on your behalf inside terminal too. If you are having some issues, you can just select things inside terminal and add to chat and then ask it to fix the problem for you. That is pretty powerful. You don't need to remember those special commands inside terminal, and all of the debugging is taken care by Cursor. We learn about GitHub, Git, and how Cursor has made this overall flow of pushing things to a repository such an easy task. Now, before moving on to demoing this onto Cursor, let's first understand the very basics of Git and GitHub. So this is how things happen inside GitHub. You have the working area or your laptop. This is where you make all of the changes. Let's say you want to make a change to a README file. You add a paragraph there and you made changes on your laptop. Now, I feel that this is a change that I might push to GitHub. By the way, if you're confused what this repository is, this is basically like a repository on GitHub, something like this. Now let's come back. We have our laptop. Now we want to push things onto GitHub repository. So the first thing what we'll do is we'll stage the changes. As I said, staging means that we feel that this might be the change that we might push to GitHub. These are not confirmed yet. And that is what happens in commit. When we have added our files onto staging area and we feel that, okay, now is a good time that I can confirm my changes. That's when I'll commit my changes. And that will go to local head. Now, what is this head? Head basically indicates the last commit that you have made. It basically points to that point that these are the most recent changes in your laptop. That is why we have a local head. Now, once it's inside the local head, then you can push those changes to the repository. And then those changes can be seen on GitHub. That is the overall workflow of things. Now, there is one more thing I want you to understand. When you are working on making changes to a GitHub repository, you clone it onto your laptop and then make some changes, and then basically we follow that whole workflow to push things to GitHub. But there is one more nuance there. You see this main written here and you see these gray circles. Those are the commits. The circles are the commits, and the whole path that you see in gray is the main branch. That is called a branch. This is another branch that you see here, the one in purple. That is, let's say, a feature branch. Now, what are these branches and why are they used? So you can assume, let's say, there are multiple developers working on this particular repository and they are making different kind of changes. Now, let's say a person is working on this feature branch. So they'll keep on adding more and more commits to that feature branch. And once they are confirmed, they'll send a pull request from this feature branch onto the main branch. Now, what is this pull request? Pull request basically means that here are my changes and I want to add this to the main branch. And that is the usual approach in which open source contributions on GitHub works. Now, let's move on to our cursor. And let's make some changes and see how cursor can help in that. Here we are inside cursor. Now, if you want to work with GitHub and Git inside cursor, you just need to go here and click on this. If you don't see this view, you might have to enable Git onto this repository that you're working on. I see a lot of changes right there. I also can see the graph of the commits that are made on this repository. You can see that our main branch is right here at the commit add memory game, and you can see all sorts of changes that are there to be committed. In normal workflow, what we do is we type all of these things like git status, and it will give me all of the changes that are present there. Now, if let's say I want to add the changes inside the readme to staging area. So let's say if I want to add the changes inside readme to our staging area, I'll write the command git add and then the name of the file, in this case readme.md, and it will add things on to the staging area. Once I am done, I can add a commit, git commit, and then add a small message, update readme, and that would basically commit the changes to the readme. But you don't need all of that now. You have cursor, right? So you should chat with cursor and then tell that I want to add changes to the staging area, I want to commit all sorts of things. You can even switch branches. You can do all sorts of things inside cursor by just knowing English. Isn't that amazing? So let me show you here. I'll go on to this. I'll say I have made some changes to the readme.md5. You can even add the context there. You can search for readme.md and then say, now can you add it to staging area? So it will ask you to run this command. See the difference? I don't even need to remember those commands now. It just basically does our job. But one thing to keep in mind, we definitely need to know about these commands, not remember it. In case it runs something terrible, we would know beforehand. So this looks good to me now. I'll just click on run. So it added the changes to the staging area. It is even asking me to commit the changes. So for that, I'll just say, okay, go ahead and commit the changes with needed commit message. Let's see what it does. It's saying git commit update readme with comprehensive game documentation. I feel this is too elaborate. I'll go on to this and ask it to do something differently. I'll say keep commit messages short. Update readme with game documentation. Okay, I think that should be fine. I'll just hit run and it committed the changes. If you just want to verify that, you can see it inside this graph. You see that we have update readme with game documentation. And this main that you see, it's a local head. And origin main means the one that is on our repository on GitHub. So we are one commit ahead. You can even ask it to push those changes to GitHub. Okay, wonderful. I think we can push the changes to GitHub. Can you do it for me? And it's asking me to run the git push command, and I'll just hit run. And it wants me to sign into GitHub, so I'll do that. Once I have confirmed, signed into GitHub, then you can go on to GitHub to see the changes. And here, as you can see, I have updated README with the game documentation. That commit is there. If you click on this, these are the changes. Let's look at those changes now. We just eliminated some section there, and that's it. With just writing in English inside cursor, we are able to work with Git. This was a major nightmare for people who don't remember those commands inside Git, and it is working wonderfully. Now let's do more interesting stuff here. I'll go back to my AI experiments repository. So let's say I go ahead and create a new branch, this dev branch, and I'll click on this. and it will create a dev branch coming out of main now. This is one of the most common workflows that I want you guys to remember. So just click on this, create branch dev from main, and it will create a new branch called as dev. I could have created this branch inside cursor using something called as GitHub MCP, but more on that later on, not in this video. So let's say I created this branch right here. Now I want to check out that branch inside dev, but we are on main branch. So I won't go inside the terminal. That is to 2020-ish. Now we are in 2025. So let's make things interesting. I'll ask cursor, I have a branch called dev. I want to switch to that. So it will try to check out dev. Let's just run. I'm hoping that it would fail because we haven't fetched all of the branches yet. Looks like there was some settings issue. So I fixed it and I'm back. I just said I have a dev branch. Can you check out that? And it just checked us out to that dev branch. As you can see, switch to a new branch dev. Let's just verify that. You can verify that by just saying git branch and you can see that you are on dev branch. Amazing. Let's say I don't like this scoring strategy. I want it to be a paragraph. So what I'll do, I'll go to readme and select this one and add to chat. Make this more easier to understand and shorter. I just click on that and it went ahead and started making some changes. And it basically used the same thing, add bullet points, and it has shortened them up. Let's say I'm good with this scoring tips. I don't like the scoring tips. Should be scoring strategy still. And so I think this looks good. So what I'll do is keep. Now let's say I'm done with the changes. Now what I'll do with cursor is say, take these changes that I made right now and then push it to the dev branch on GitHub. And once we are there, we'll send a pull request from there. So let's say, can you push this change to my dev branch? It will add the readme file. That looks good. Adding to the staging area. And it will ask me to do some commit. So it says git commit update readme simplify scoring strategy section for better readability. That looks good to me. Not one of the best commit messages, but good. So run and then we move forward and it's saying git push origin dev, basically pushing to dev branch. And once you are done with that inside cursor, you can see that dev had recent pushes 3 seconds ago, compare and pull request. So I'll just go there and click on pull request and you can see the changes that you made and then basically write some description down and just create a pull request. And here you have it. The pull request has been created. You can see the changes here. You can see the commit messages here and you see how powerful it is. We just wanted to push some changes to a dev branch, create pull requests and all of that. And all of that is being taken care by cursor. You don't need to remember any commands at all. You just need the knowledge to verify those commands. You know, this was a very straightforward flow and that was the intention. We wanted to make things simpler for understanding purposes. But sometimes, you know, there are cases where there are merge conflict. Now, what is merge conflict? Now, merge conflict is a situation when two or more people are working on a particular file and they are making changes to the same place in that file. Let's say somebody else is also working on this scoring strategy and made edits to the first line and I have made changes to all those 4 lines. So there is a conflict and all of those conflicts can sometimes be messy to resolve and that is where cursor helps. So it can help you resolve those conflicts too. We won't go a lot deeper into that, but you can try it on your own. I'm back in cursor. Now there are more interesting stuff that you can do inside cursor. One such is git blame. Now what does this git blame mean? It basically means looking at a particular part of code and then saying that who wrote this code and in which commit. So you can do so quickly by pressing Command Shift and P and then writing this git toggle file blame and then click on it. That would enable it. Now let's say if you go to any line, as you can see, it says add memory game sweet Cody 2 days ago. This was the commit message. This was the person who did the work and it was 2 days ago. And if you toggle on it, you can see the commit message. You can look at it on GitHub too. Pretty amazing, right? This is one of the most interesting features and the most used one too. One more interesting feature inside cursor is you can look at the commit and what changed inside that commit. You see this section for graph. Let's say I want to see the changes that were made inside this add memory came sweet coding. And you can see a bunch of different changes that were made inside this, which is very similar to other IDs like VS Code, but good to have inside Cursor too. You can look at the diff line by line on what changed. Now we also talked about pushing changes and creating a PR. But what about pulling those changes? Let's say somebody else made a change to the main branch. Let's say they added one or two more commits. Now we want to pull all of those changes inside our local repository. That is what you see on your laptop. So we can ask Cursor to do that too. So in order to do that, I'll just say I see that we are on dev branch. Can you switch to main and then pull all the recent commits and hit enter. Let's see what it does. It will probably check out main, that's correct. So it's on the main branch and it's just pulling the changes and run. And it looks like we are up to date and you can see it here that we have 3 commits, the most up to date too. So in summary until now, you can work with all sorts of commands that you used to run on terminal and you don't need to remember all of it. That will be taken care inside this chat window. Now one thing to keep in mind, you still need to know about the whole Git workflow. The reason why I say so is because AI hasn't reached that level that it can do all things perfectly. You need to be there to verify what it's doing. Now let's move forward. There is one more very interesting feature and I would say I use it a lot of times, almost every time when somebody sends a PR. What I do is I like to understand the changes in a simple fashion because most of the times you don't have the context that the person sending the PR has. So what I do is get their changes in here inside Cursor and then ask what are the changes, give me the summary and then do some back and forth questioning to Cursor to understand what changes they made there. And how can you do it? You see this button right here. You can add the context and then select Git. And then you can select the branch or even the commit. So let's say I am interested in this add memory game. I'll ask, give me short summary of what happened in this commit. And it will give me the summary of what happened inside this commit. And here we go. What was created, bunch of different details, key features. Then you can go dive deeper into what were the file changes, or you can select those code snippets and then ask what does this mean. If you are learning a new language, that is the best way to learn. But this is a game-changing feature that I really like from Cursor. This is just the tip of the iceberg. You can use it to rebase a feature branch. We never got into rebasing, but just saying that it can do a bunch of stuff, including rebasing, squashing, interactive rebases. As we saw that it can generate commit messages automatically so you don't have to think about it again and again. It can write PR descriptions. Basically, it can do a lot. I would like you to pause this video now and go on to Cursor and experiment a lot. And that's it for this tutorial. Now you know how to use Cursor effectively for your daily workflow. We covered a lot actually in this video, from inline code completions to chat window to documentation, terminal, Git, and even some of those cool hidden tricks that I talked about. If this video really helped you in any way, drop a like or even click on that subscribe button and I'll be posting more such videos for you. And if you have some suggestions or feedback, feel free to comment on this video and we'll take a look into that. Thanks for watching everybody. See you in the next one.